One of the great things about Adobe PDF SmartForms is that it's very easy to create tables and repeatable sections where you only design one row, and then you can simply say how many rows you'd like in the resulting form. I'm going to start off by building a simple table, design that one row as well as a header row, and then say I'd like 3 rows. And then as a second stage, so 3 fixed rows, and then as a second stage I'll show you how we can easily add buttons that allow me to add and remove rows as I like. I'm going to start off by going into the block section of Composer and dragging a table into my dependents section. So dependents are children or other relatives that are living with me. For the moment, I'm going to leave the column count as 3. I'm going to leave the number of rows as 3. And I'll leave the rows width as the defaults, which means they're all set to 100%, which means that each row will use up exactly the same amount of space. We'll change that later. As you can see, the table is created for you with an automatic header, row and footer. The header and footer are obvious. You can also explicitly remove the headers and footers if you don't want them, but they're handy. And the way that I build out the table is simply drag the appropriate number of widgets into each of the headers and rows. So because I've got 3 columns, I need 3 widgets in the header, 3 in the row, and optionally 3 in the footer. I'm going to start with a header, and I'm just going to drag regular text objects. So the first one is going to be the dependent name, then their age, and then I'm also going to capture the relationship. So is it a child or another type of relationship? So that's for the header row. It's just text. I'm going to drag in 3 different types of object. I'm going to start by dragging in a text field, which will be their name. Now it is asking me for the name, for the label. However, by default in Composer, when you drop a text field into the table, the label will actually be suppressed, and you'll see that happening in a moment. Then I'm going to drop in an integer field for the age, so that they can only type integers. And finally, I'm going to drop in a drop-down list for the relationship. For the moment, I'm going to leave the footer alone. Let's just quickly tweak the relationship combo box. Double click, data tab, let's add child, parent, or other relative, and save. Let's go and preview what this looks like. As you can see, I have my table. It has a header row with the text as I specified. It has data entry fields for a name, which is a text field. If I try to type text in there, it won't work because it is expecting an age. And in the relationship dropdown, I have the same thing, and I can create as many rows as I want just by tweaking the top level table number of rows. I can also completely change the styling. A couple of other things to note. We are getting row highlighting showing up. That's a default behavior of forms. It just highlights every alternate row in a different color, which helps you with very long tables to line everything up. And as we specified, 3 columns, each consuming 100% of the space available or in exact proportion to each other. Let's go and do some tweaking. The first thing I'm going to do is double click on the table itself and add an extra column, as well as tweaking the widths of some of the columns. Really what I want is name to be quite wide, age to be small, relationship to be a bit bigger, and then I want to add an extra column that has a button in it. Let's see how we do that. So I'm going to change the number of columns to 4. I'm going to leave the main column at 100%. I'm going to reduce the second column, which is the age, to 10%. I'm going to make the relationship column 20% and also the button column 20%. And I might just change the initial row count to 6 because I feel like it. Now I do need to add in the extra fields. I'm going to add in action, which is going to be an action to perform on this particular row. I'm going to add in a special type of button. This one is called a delete repeat instance, and I'm going to drop that in the final column of the form. Now when I drop one of these in, I also need to tell the delete button which bit of repeating information I'm going to affect. And to do that, I simply browse to the row and say I want to delete the current instance of that row. That's all I need to do, and I'm done. Finally, I'm going to add an add button so that I can add additional rows, and I'm going to drop that in underneath my table. And I'm going to say add dependent as the label, and again I need to link that to the repeatable content, which again is the row. It's the row that repeats. And save. Let's go and preview. Let's look at a couple of things. Firstly, the column widths are now correct. Name takes up 100%, age takes up 10%, relationship 20, and the button 20. Now, just a reminder that with percentages, you can make them all combined to add up to exactly 100%, and you really should. But if you don't, Composer automatically takes care of adjusting everything so that the percentages are all relative to each other. The other thing you'll notice is I changed the default number of rows to 6, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows. Let's have a look at some other things though. We also added the delete button. Let's see what happens when we click that. Beautiful. And you'll note, because we're using layout managers, and I know this is not a layout manager video, but because we're using layout managers, as I delete things, all of the fields below this field flow up and accommodate the space that is used up. I can also add those rows back if I'd like to, just by clicking the add button. Really simple. The fields themselves work exactly the same as they did before, except I've got more space. Excellent. That's how easy it is. There are a couple of things about tables that you should be aware of. The first is you should always have the correct number of fields that match the number of columns. A couple of other things. You can add additional header and footer rows. Typically, you can actually even add an extra body row, but that's less common. And those are contained as table row elements in table footer and table header blocks that you can drag in. One other thing that you should be aware of is if I go to one of the widgets, under layout, there is an option called column span. And what column span does is it means that this particular widget will actually span multiple columns. So if I set that to 2, name would actually span columns 1 and 2 of the table. Normally we'd leave that blank, but it can occasionally be useful. There will be some additional videos that demonstrate some of the other features of tables, such as putting calculations into tables. You can put calculations inside of tables, as well as putting calculations into the footer row to sum up all of the rows in the table. We'll look at that separately. And we'll also look at repeating subforms. So where you have too much data to fit into a single row, you can lay those out into something called a repeating subform. They work identically to a table with the same add and delete buttons, but you just have a lot more real estate that you can use.